In the final days of World War II, a small medieval castle in the Austrian Alps became the site of one of the war's strangest battles. American soldiers, German Wehrmacht, French soldiers, and even a German Waffen SS officer would all end up fighting together against the German Waffen SS. Now, this wasn't a large-scale battle, nor did it last very long, yet it brought enemies together in a way that sounds like it's fake. But no, this actually happened. This conflict would receive the name of the Battle for Castle Itter, and it's believed to be the only time during World War II where the American soldiers and the German soldiers would cooperate together to fight side by side. So buckle up while I bring this weird yet interesting story back to life once more. May 4th, 1945, a Kubelwagen with 2 soldiers would come speeding around a corner, charging straight towards the 23rd Tank Battalion, being led by Captain John Jack Lee. But they aren't armed, nor is this a suicide mission. No, this is a surrender. In the passenger seat would be Major Joseph Sepp Gangel, a soldier who had been working with the Austrian resistance. You see, although under the Nazi flag, he did not support it. He would utilize his role in the military to help those who have been wronged. And this very moment was his time to shine. He would surrender with a note in his hand and explaining in English that there were soldiers in a prison that needed to be helped badly. And on the note, it would pretty much explain what he just said. There were French soldiers held up in an SS prison that were soon to be executed. This was their plea for help. But of course, filler is needed. Prior to this, there would be a prison located in the Austrian Alps of Itter, Tyrol. This would be a prison holding French prisoners and high-ranking officials. This prison would be named Castle Itter. This castle would be built in the 13th century, first serving as a fortress, then a hotel, and now a prison. Historically, this prison would be connected to a Nazi death camp, but prisoners here were not executed. No, they would be kept alive as bargaining tools. The people in this prison would include ex-prime ministers Paul Reynard and Edouard Daladier, as well as tennis star Jean Bourgeois, as well as former military figures with their families. It was up until this point where they thought that the people in the prison lived in comfort. I mean, the place used to be a hotel, and they were gonna be used as bargaining tools. I guess you could say they needed to be in good shape. But now that the war is coming to a close, the SS no longer have a need for them, and they want them dead. Lucky for them, all the German guards at the prison had abandoned their posts and just left, so the prisoners were able to get into the armory and arm themselves. Not so lucky, the Waffen SS were coming back, and they were coming back for blood. But even with full access to the armory, this would not be enough to defend themselves. An attempt for rescue would first be tried by a Yugoslavian political prisoner, Zvonimir Čučković, but it would turn out unsuccessful. It is said that he did survive, but by the time he got to the Americans, he didn't speak any English, and the note was not translated well enough, so the Americans thought that he was a spy. A second plea for help would be carried out by the castle's Czech cook, who would finally be able to reach Austrian resistance in a nearby town. That resistance would of course be Major Gangel. Back to present time, Lee would ponder on this plea for a bit, and after some time, he would finally get his men moving. 4 tanks, including his own, the Bastard and Jenny, would make their way to the castle. Along the way, he would meet up with Gangel's men, but at the same time losing men too. Not because of conflict, no. The roads were very treacherous to drive on. It was very, very hard for the tanks to travel on. So he would end up having to leave 3 tanks behind guarding the road. By the time Lee and Gangel would have reached the castle, they would have a total of 1 tank, 14 Americans, and roughly 12 resistance fighters. However, at the castle, they would meet up with a German Waffen SS officer who had defected. His name was Kurt Siegfried Schrader. After defecting, he would vow to protect these prisoners with his life, no matter what. The prisoners were not as happy as they could have been. They were not as amused with the lackluster amount of reinforcements that had come to help them. So Lee, Gangel, and Schrader would now talk business. They would decide to hunker down in the castle because it was fortified and made out of heavy material. This would be better than getting caught out in the open where they could not defend themselves, mainly because the surrounding area had not been cleared by the Allied forces, so nobody knew what was there. So they would choose to stay and arm themselves for battle. Lee would have his tank back up right in front of the door with a gun facing outward, ready for an attack. The German and the resistance fighters would then all arm themselves and get into position. All of the German soldiers had to wear a dark cloth around their left arm, obviously to be identified. Another plan would take place that if they were overrun by the SS, they would all retreat to the central keep, ready to engage into hand-to-hand combat. Now that everyone was ready, they would all wait in anticipation. Night falls and the men would rest. Yet a small group of SS would attack at 4 a.m. Yet they would quickly be silenced by the 50 calibers on the Bastard and Jenny. Around 8 a.m., gunfire would ring from the Germans. This would be because one of the soldiers that had vowed to help Gangel had defected and ran away. Now major problems and distrust had erupted against all of the men. If that man got out and went to the SS, he would have told them exactly all of the Allies' defensive positions. Not only that, how many people were there, and how much ammo they had. And Lee would also question the men and say, did you even really try to hit the man who was running away? No matter, because soon after that, the full brute of the SS would show themselves. Multiple trucks would arrive with over 100 men. They would all scatter around the forest, arming themselves with 88mm pack guns, as well as 20mm cannons. The battle would now begin. And the SS would immediately start shooting at the castle. The people inside of the castle would quickly start to return fire, showing that they were not weak, nor were they ready to give up. Unfortunately, for the Americans, one of those 88mm guns had pointed right to the tank, and after firing, it would effectively disable it. Luckily, all the crew got out before the ammo cooked off and the tank would explode. This was an all-out war, yet no man in the castle chose to cower. Even the VIPs were fighting back. Ignorantly enough, one of the VIPs, Paul Raynard, was exposing himself too much in the gunfire. When Gangle saw this, he would run over to save his life, but sadly, he would get shot in the process by a sniper, losing his life shortly thereafter. Another one of the VIPs, the tennis star, John Boratra, would ask Lee if he could make a dash over the wall and into the forest to guide the reinforcements to the castle. Lee would say yes to this daring offer, so Jean would dress himself as an Austrian peasant, vault the wall, and run into the woods. And he would escape the gunfire. But this is when stuff starts to get a little bit funny. This is my favorite part of it all. Right outside of the battle, John would run into two SS soldiers positioned with a machine gun. Committed to his role as an Austrian peasant, he would make it look like he was looking for food. Shortly thereafter, he would then take a leak directly in front of the men's eyesight. He would then give them a wave and then walk off. Mind you, not one word was said during this whole encounter. Back at the castle, Lee would try to verbally guide the allies to the castle. At this point, ammo is running thin, so they definitely need reinforcements. The men knew that they would not be able to hold off for much longer, so they would all get ready for hand-to-hand combat like previously agreed upon. But just when the SS start pushing forward, the American reinforcements would come thundering through, the tanks rumbling, the men shooting. This was the most beautiful part of it all. Most of the SS soldiers would get shot, and some would immediately surrender. And with them, funny enough, the tennis player with a smirk on his face, happy that him and his comrades got to make it out alive. In all, only one life would be lost that day. That would be Gangle. Many men would be wounded, but for the most part, they would all be okay. In the end, Major Joseph Gangle would be honored as a hero in the Austrian resistance. Captain John C. Jack Lee would be awarded a Distinguished Service Cross, and the SS officer Kurt Siegfried Schrader would only receive 2 years in jail, which is a much lighter sentence than what he would have originally gotten. And the castle still stands to this day, yet it is privately owned, so no tours are ever held here. Kinda strange if you ask me. I'd say that's a historical mark. That was quite literally one of the last battles in the European theater during World War II. 72 hours after that, World War II in the European theater would officially end. But that, ladies and gentlemen, was the battle for Castle Itter, one of the most strangest conflicts during World War II, and the only time where the Germans and the Americans would fight side by side. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to show some love down below. It means big time. You all have a good day and a good night. Y'all stay safe. Peace.